Hello, everybody. Thank you for hopping on our briefing today on an early assessment of President Trump. To get us started, while we wait for folks to get on, we're going to do a little poll for you. We want to see what you think. Who do you think the most movable voters are by age group? Do you think it is the 65 and plus group, 18 to 34-year-olds, 50 to 64-year-olds, or 35 to 49-year-olds? I'll give a couple more people, give a couple more minutes to let a few more folks get in and answer this question. All righty. And the correct answer is 18 to 34-year-olds. About 47% of us here got that correct. But a close runner-up that people thought, let me share results with you all. 35 to 49 years old is what a good chunk of us also thought. But with that said, we're going to get started on the presentation for today. Just so you know, this webinar will be recorded. If you have any questions as the webinar goes on, and we recommend that you share any and all questions or comments in the Q&A or chat boxes. I'm Kamel Ash, the Growth and Marketing Manager here at Change Research. You will hear a little bit from Stephen Claremont, our head of polling, later. And I'm going to hand it over to Mike Greenfield, our co-founder and CEO.
Thanks, Kamel. And I'll share a few brief words about Change Research and what we're doing here. I co-founded the company in 2017 to democratize access to public opinion. And I believed in 2017 and believe today that there is room to innovate and improve substantially the way that we measure and understand public opinion, and that by doing so, we can help to understand what people want and need and make the world a little bit more humane, scientific, and just. We launched Bold Research in 2021 to help leaders understand what people want and need from a nonpartisan perspective. And we have an awesome team of pollsters, engineers, data scientists that are doing great work to understand public opinion and to provide near constant access to that sort of data. We poll people exclusively online. We don't rely on panels of semi-professional survey takers. Instead, we recruit new participants for every poll that we run. And we have a number of different products. Feel free to reach out to me, Mike at changeresearch.com, or anyone else on our team. Among them are Spark, which is a fast way to understand public opinion in an affordable way. Magnify, which is a new take on modeling using AI, and Voices, which is qualitative research. Since day one, Change Research has prided ourselves on being fast, affordable, and accurate. We field polls in days and not weeks. Our accuracy has consistently been strong, and we're very transparent about it. You can read our 2024 accuracy report on our website, and our polling is very, very affordable. Finally, one of the things that I saw in this industry that we have constantly tried to innovate on and change is the idea that a poll is something that where you survey 600 people, you get some data, you create a report, and then for all intents and purposes, you throw that data away. We are very much operating with the belief that aggregating data and understanding data in a deep way over a long period of time is incredibly valuable in providing better products and services. And my colleague Stephen, who's going to walk you through understanding about Trump today, is a real embodiment of that. Stephen has been polling deeply about President Trump since 2018. Really understands opinion about him in a very nuanced way from when his first presidency through the Biden presidency and now today. I'm glad to hand off to him.
Thanks, Mike, and thanks, Kamel. What I'm going to be going over today is a poll that we conducted from February 23rd through 27th with over 2,700 voters nationwide. And this reflects the distribution of voters by age, gender, race, education, region of the country, and how people voted in 2024. And I will just start with the caveat of any polling of Trump and any polling of recent events get quickly swept up into the constant barrage that we see from him and his administration. So as you see, when we ask about approval of specific actions, it's only through the end of February. And when we were trying to field the poll, like we were trying to get in, I think we wrote it on a Friday, and then that night he fired the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the heads of important people in the military and had to quickly put that in. And as we know, there's been lots of different things that have happened since then. But I think this poll is a pretty good snapshot of where Trump stands, sort of at the beginning of March, but also the direction of where things are going. And I think it's pretty clear when we go through this, not only from our polling, but from other polling that's been released, is Trump's popularity is declining from the sort of shock and awe from the beginning of his presidency and the sort of surprising results from the 2024 election, where it was sort of assumed if he won, he would win and lose the popular vote nationwide. He won it by a small margin, and that sort of colored how he's been covered and the sort of perception of him since then. As we'll see, the issues that are really propping him up are immigration, DEI, and trans issues. That's what's motivating his base the most. But he is really falling behind on the economy and cost of living. Voters really haven't changed their perceptions of not only their income, of where they think prices are going from the beginning of his administration through what they felt the last 4 years. It's not like all of a sudden there was an epiphany, Trump is president, and people have changed their economic outlook. It is very much staying the same, which when you have a presidency that is as forward, engaged, and activist as this one is, they will own it much faster than other presidencies would have. As we'll see through this, there's a real concern above all other issues of just the lack of honesty of politicians and lack of honesty in information people will receive. And as I've already been talking to campaigns of people this year, the key thing going forward is driving the perception of you being an honest broker. There's lots of room that you can operate within that. But I think one of the real existential challenges people face is knowing what is true and knowing what is not true. And people think about that constantly. And the actions and mistakes the Trump administration have made are real opportunities for us to drive a narrative about them and derail them from the sort of hero narrative that they project constantly. These really include absorbing Canada into the United States, which is deeply unpopular here, not quite as unpopular as it is in Canada, but deeply unpopular. Closing the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is a real mistake for them. And dropping the charges against Mayor Eric Adams and pardoning violent January 6 felons as well as the firing of federal workers that the FAA. All of this is creating the perception of chaos, not solving problems, and are unpopular across the board. So we're going to sort of look at voter profiles, who is movable, cost of living, voter concerns of sort of where they are, what they're concerned about most, and then looking deeply into Donald Trump's performance on specific issues, where he's strong and where he's weak. And we'll do a little bit of look at the Democratic response. Again, this was done before the sort of recent debate about the budget and the continuing resolution for this year, but is applicable going forward. So a big way that I thought about the 2024 election was looking at who sort of is movable and who is not. And when Joe Biden was president, what we found was the movable voter was really the person who somewhat disapproved of the job he was doing or were not sure. Those voters were voting for Democrats, when in the past, like people that somewhat disapproved of an administration, like when Barack Obama was president, they were generally supporting Republicans. I think what it makes this unique moment now in trying to figure out who this group is that there's no one who somewhat disapproves of the job that President Trump is doing. I think it's about 2%. And 86% of voters either strongly approve of the job he's doing or strongly disapprove of him. And this is like, when you look at the composition of the voters we talked to, less than half describe themselves as either a strong Democrat or a strong Republican. They're either independent or somewhere in the middle. And I think that's true of any poll that you look at that breaks party ID into a nuanced way. So there's very little soft opinion. So what we group together are really the soft Trump people are people who somewhat approve of him, somewhat disapprove of him, or are not sure. And then added in, we asked a generic House vote question, which was 47-45 Democrat, and added in people who were undecided in that context. So if you break down the electorate that way, there 46% of the electorate is anti-Trump, strongly disapprove of him, and are supporting the Democrat for the House. 36% strongly approve of Trump or the Republican in the House, and about 18% are soft movables. And this chart, and as you'll see in a lot of these charts, I try to pack a lot of data into my charts. So some of them might not be like easy to read during the course of this webinar, but we will make these available so you can look at them and stare at them and sort of absorb all of what the data is trying to tell us. I think it's the biggest challenge as a pollster is we have mountains of data, and how can you tell the simplest story with that? So overall, 47% have approved of the job that Trump is doing, 52% disapprove. 43% believe his first term is better than the second, and 51% believe it's worse. And when you look at the soft voters, they generally approve of the job that Trump is doing, most of it softly. And when you look at them demographically, they're more men than women. They are younger overall than certainly the Trump base voter. They are less white, significantly less white, about the same level of education, college attainment as the Republican voter. Democratic voters are much more likely to be college graduates. And these soft voters, 62% identify as Republican and 63% identify as having voted for Trump. So when we're communicating and thinking about like the base and persuadables and how we talk to them differently, I think like the soft voter, the movable voter when Biden was president really was Democrats who were dissatisfied with the president overall, but they were approving of their Democratic governor or Democrats overall. Really, the soft voter here, the movables that we have to win over really are Republican leaning, but they're Republicans who have checked out on Trump. And I think it's always been a mistake to sort of view the Trump voter as a monolith. And we'll see that as we go through this. I think the other key thing is, as we're thinking about where things are, is 67% of voters say that their income is falling behind the cost of living. This is not a partisan skewed question. Democrats, independents, and Republicans largely believe their income is falling behind the cost of living. And we, through our partners with Future Majority and Mark Riddle, asked this question a lot in a lot of different places in the last 4 years. And as you can see, this is between 2/3 and over 80% of voters generally believe their income has been falling behind the cost of living. This is not something that has either gone up or gone down since Trump has become president. It's where voters are and where they think they are economically. I think the other thing we've seen is a drop in consumer confidence once Trump has become president. We were told for a year from his campaign that you elect Trump, everything will be great again, and you'll feel it immediately. And he's responsible for the stock market gains and Biden's presidency. But the first reading of this was a drop in consumer confidence. And that dashed line is the most current reading. And it is below consumer confidence through most of recent presidential administrations, going back to the start of this data when Jimmy Carter was president. It has only really been lower during the financial crisis and during all the various crises at the end of the Carter administration. One could say there's room to grow with this. But the key thing when Trump was president the first time, people were fairly confident and he was able to maintain that. That is not true now. Or he's able to maintain that until COVID. That is not true now. People are not confident, and there isn't sort of a magical solution that he came into office with. And when we ask people about whether they believe costs for various things will go up or go down over the next few months, particularly food and groceries, utilities, healthcare, gasoline, these are the measures in the household budget index that our partners at Primerica have been largely measuring. And people overall significantly believe, 2/3 believe costs of groceries, utilities, healthcare are going to go up. And the Trump administration is not really messaging anymore that costs will go down. Either they're blaming the Biden administration or they're saying, well, these are things presidents can't control. As you see, Republicans overall are split on whether things are going to go up or down or stay the same, except for gas, where they believe it will go down. But the soft Trump voter and those who are undecided largely believe the costs of goods are going to go up. And it's something that we need to be talking about constantly. The things that are stressing voters out the most are groceries. And that's true of Democrats, independents, and Republicans, followed by an unexpected $1,000 cost, utility bills, rent or mortgage payments. But really, grocery costs are what are defining people's stress and how they are measuring where they perceive their income is. And that's stuff that the president has already said, well, I can't really control that. In terms of voter concerns, like this is a chart. Again, a lot of data on this chart. What you're looking for are the dark red numbers and the dark red squares. And as you can see for Democrats, some of the largest things are the erosion of truth and spread of misleading information is what their concerns are. This is a bipartisan concern, as well as elected officials not telling truth to the public. Where you see Democrats significantly more concerned than Republicans are on large corporations having too much power, policies that serve the wealthy and hurt ordinary people, America no longer being a democracy. As you can see, things that Republicans are particularly concerned about: children being exploited and exposed to danger. As you'll see on the next slide. Yep. I'm sorry about that. Migrants coming into America and changing our culture. And terrorist attacks launched on America and American allies. Democrats are really concerned about America no longer being a democracy that holds free and fair elections, government removing regulations that protect people, racial and gender bias, and abortion bans. So some of these concerns are really partisan coded. Others, particularly as it relates to honesty, is something that is universal. So in looking at Trump's performance on issues, the things that stand out to me on this is he has his job overall. which is, as we said, 47%. That is higher than he is perceived on very specific things, with the exception of immigration and issues along the southern border, combating drug trafficking, crime, and public safety. Where he's really lagging his overall approval rating is on the economy and reducing cost of living. Majorities oppose his performance on that, and he's only at 39% on reducing the cost of living, and really low on reducing prescription drug prices and healthcare. And the importance of, I can't overstate this importance of his perception on the economy enough. On the left this is from Gallup. When they asked, these are just sort of measures when they asked both his approval rating overall and his approval on the economy. In every single poll that they did during his first term, Donald Trump got better approvals on the economy than he did overall. And then when you sandwich that, look at that, Barack Obama and Joe Biden always got worse approval ratings on the economy than they did overall. This most recent poll that they did, which he was at 45% overall. By comparison, 20 years earlier, the first poll of the George W. Bush administration, Gallup found approval rating at 57%, and he was at only 42% approval on the economy. That was, you sort of think about like what he was selling. He was selling, you vote for me, we'll go back to pre-COVID, the pre-COVID economy, the things that you liked about my administration. And there were a lot of people through the chaos from COVID and the sort of all the different uncertainty that came for that really wanted to go back. But when they're finding, like in the story, The Monkey's Paw, where people are given a wish of something like prosperity and then bad things happen to them afterwards, that's kind of what we're seeing here, in, at least as relates to the economy and his presidency. And then just sort of overall, this is sort of net approval on these issues. As you can see, Democrats largely view him negatively on everything. The Republicans, you see a little more spread of difference on him. But with these soft voters, the things that they are most split on, and again, these are Republican-leaning voters, is his ability to reduce the cost of living, his tariff and trade policy that's gotten a lot more erratic since in the time since we did this poll, the environment, women's reproductive health, and healthcare are all things that he is weakest on. And he is strongest really on crime and immigration. But with independents, it's corruption, managing the federal government, foreign policy, the economy, all real weak points. And then the thing that I like to look at the most, particularly with polls about Trump, is looking at strong approval among Republicans. And this is where you can sort of see the spread and difference on how they're viewing him and the direction where things can go. So what is, like, they are most strongly approving of his job on immigration and less approving of the economy. Like, not even 50% approve of the job that he's doing reducing the cost of living. And then things like prescription drug prices and healthcare, really low, intense ratings among Republicans, which is like the things that if we strike at relentlessly, can help solidify the early impressions we've seen about the failures that they've made so far. The other thing we did in this survey is we asked some paired descriptions of the president, usually a positive versus a negative. Traits-wise, he's strongest when people are much more likely to view him as calling the shots versus letting other people lead. People don't see him as a passive president. That is certainly true even among Democrats. 22% believe that he's calling the shots. People are more likely to view him as strong than weak. That's why we needed to be talking about his weakness, and particularly when he displays it. We needed to be talking about that the last 4 years, but we have opportunities for going forward. And people believe that see him as more holding people in Washington, D.C. accountable rather than letting the lobbyists and professional politicians call the shots in D.C. And the soft voters overwhelmingly see him as the positives in these than the negatives. Overall, he's viewed a little bit more showing signs of age and mental decline than energetic and sharp. rarely telling the truth as opposed to not afraid to tell the truth. And it's a destroyer of government with no plan to fix it, as opposed to a government reformer with results. The particularly weak points he has, particularly with the soft and undecided voters, are when you talk about who his focus is on. So majorities overall believe he fights for the wealthy and corporations as opposed to a fighter for working people, and focus primarily on himself as opposed to focus primarily on people like you. Those are the things that we need to be talking about the most, is whose side he is on, because sort of the myth of him as the fighter for the working man is going to be harder to maintain as they work towards their budget and tax agreement in Congress going forward that involve Medicaid cuts, potential Medicaid cuts, and potential tax cuts as well. The soft and undecided voters are a little more likely to see him as a promise keeper, putting America first as opposed to himself, and not corrupt. But overall, independent voters, the completely independent voters, are largely negative towards him. The other thing to point out is, as Mike said, I've been polling for a long time, and we're asking these pairs for a long time. Gary Pierce, who I see on this list of participants, I know has seen a lot of these from pollsters that I have worked for in the past. And usually unpopular politicians and popular governors and senators can do well on a lot of these trait questions, but they always do poorly on the truly special leader versus just another politician. And this is his strength, to be honest. This is his strength. Like, he can be weak on a lot of these traits, but like 44% believe of him as a truly special leader, just 41% just another politician, 15% not sure, 23% of Democrats and 26% of independents still are not sure, like just don't see him the same way as just another politician like they do everybody else. And I think that's part of like when we sort of go after his strength, is it's really the performance, rather than well, he's just like everyone else. That's never really going to work. It's the results and what he's delivering and who he's for that matter. And before moving on from this, we asked these same traits, in a nationwide poll we did in November of 2019. And it is striking to me how, when you look at these numbers on corruption, fighting for working people, focus primarily on people like you versus himself, these haven't changed much. There's like only a point or two on all these measures. The only thing that's different is holding people in Washington, D.C. accountable a little bit better on this than letting lobbyists and professional politicians call the shots. And I think that's the part. It's like, we're never going to beat him by saying he's a disengaged president, or he's letting Elon run things, or like he is the main actor. And we need to treat him this way for everything that all the unpopular things that he's going to try to shuttle off to Russ Vought or Elon or Congress or someone else. Like, he is responsible for what is happening here, and the accountability is what's mattered, because it's going to be harder to sort of like win an accountability war head up against him. And sort of the words that are best associated with Trump, but sort of overall and with the soft voters, the people that like him, like, it's primarily focused, believe he's patriotic, strong, smart, fearless, and decisive, much more so than innovative, funny, entertaining, brilliant, or empathetic. Like, not even his voters think that he's empathetic. Democrats largely view the associate negative traits with him: dishonest, dangerous, corrupt, chaotic, authoritarian. I think our goal should be, rather than saying those over and over again, is undermining him on where he's strong. And when you look at the words best associated with Elon Musk, it's successful, smart, innovative. And when comparing both overall with soft and undecided voters, like, Trump's and Elon's strengths are different. Trump is viewed much more than Elon is as patriotic, strong, fearless, decisive, and entertaining. And Elon is successful, smart, innovative. People view Trump as funny, and Elon don't view him as funny. So like, sort of lumping them together and attacking them the same is less like the things we need to do, as always, are nuance, not look for the single one message or the single one, 3 talking points. And just know that like Elon's strengths are different than Trump's. And in a lot of ways, they can enhance the sort of image of the administration. And like each one of these traits need to be viewed separately and thought of separately when thinking about how to change perceptions. And again, this chart is better read than me sort of reading through this. But what is popular among the specific actions the Trump administration has taken overall? You can see the tariffs on goods of China, way more popular than Canada and Mexico. Ending all support for gender transitions and banning transgender people from serving in the military, ending DEI, pardoning people convicted of nonviolent crimes related to the US Capitol. I'm going to sort of skip through and go to the ones that are least popular, which are pardoning people convicted of violent crimes, ending the corruption investigation against Eric Adams, shutting down the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And this really gets at the idea of specific actions that are hurting him, but thinking about what is propping him up. Immigration, DEI, and transgender issues are really things that are, immigration is not, but DEI and transgender are things that have come up relatively recently and are culture wars that they need to stoke. Again, I've been doing this a long time, and culture war specifics come and go. And it's going to be hard for them to keep people like on their base on edge on these issues for 4 years. And like with immigration, Trump is already frustrated that he can't deport enough people. And they're going to be needing to look to new culture war things, particularly as we get closer to the midterms and we get closer to 2028. And I think it's being aware of what those are and fighting back against them, but really holding them on the things that they're doing that are unpopular, which is corruption. And then really shutting down the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is significantly more unpopular than shutting down USAID. And while both of those are bad, we have real opportunities on some of the mistakes that they're making, especially as they relate to standing up for the interests of ordinary people. And Eric Adams in particular, there's no downside in attacking that corrupt deal because he has no constituency with anybody. He's unpopular with Democrats, independents, and Republicans. And we're about to launch an omnibus poll in New York City. And I'm expecting his numbers to be like historically bad, probably on the level with Brandon Johnson in Chicago. But there's no downside to attacking him. And then when we look at what is actions are really driving intensity with Republicans, like I said, it's really transgender issues, DEI issues, USAID, international agreements like the Paris Climate Accords and World Health Organization. Again, it's going to be hard to build an administration and a hero's narrative on that when you are also, when you can see the things that are much less popular, even with Republicans, much less intensity on their actions trying to take over the Washington, D.C. city government, which they furthered in their budget this week, firing people at FAA, shutting down the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and honestly delaying the ban on TikTok. That's gotten quieter, but there's no real sort of pro-TikTok constituency within the Republican Party either. And his international actions are even more unpopular. Probably the strongest response he gets on America taking control of the Panama Canal, that is what Republicans and soft Trump voters are most supportive of. And we recently held our Change Research retreat in Atlanta, and lucky to spend a few hours at the Carter Center. And one of the things that was striking is a giant poster of "Stop the Takeover of the America Canal at Panama" that Strom Thurmond, senator from South Carolina, wrote and created for people to put in newspapers all across the country. It still motivates Republicans as much now as it did then. But when we think about taking control of Greenland, taking over the Gaza Strip, and turning Canada into America, like even the Canada thing is not popular with Republicans, more oppose it than support it, and it's deeply unpopular with the soft Trump voters. And then just quickly on the Democratic response, Democrats are very united, as we see in this poll. They're united in how they feel about Trump and Elon, how they feel about the actions that they're doing and the federal government. And they're also united in believing that Democrats are underreacting to Trump. Only 1% believe they're overreacting. 89% believe that Democrats should be opposing Trump as much as possible, as opposed to trying to find common ground. 88% believe that Democrats in Washington are not opposing Trump enough and letting him turn America into a fundamentally different country. Independent voters are more split on this, and these independents are not Trump leaning in this, as we've found, but they're more likely to believe that Democrats can't do all that much, and less sort of strong reaction to this. But there's real danger there's more danger with Democrats in perceived to not doing enough than going too far. And these numbers have grown substantially since in December, when YouGov found a split on oppose versus common ground. And we did an open end, and this is sort of, and then had AI analyze all the responses and their tone. And as you can see, we asked this question: what do you want to see differently from Trump that he's not currently doing? Anti-Trump and Democratic voters are fundamentally opposed to his presidency. They want him to resign and leave. Their tone is exasperated to desperate to deeply angry, with very personal attacks on the president's character and intelligence. But these soft voters, they are much more policy-oriented, not strong partisan framing, but they are concerned about inflation. They want different approaches. Their tone is more measured and pragmatic, and they want results rather than partisanship or personality. And I think there is no like one singular message that's going to bridge the approach that these different groups of voters want. What I think we need this year and going forward is deep figuring out, when we look at the voter file, who falls into each camp, and have a better understanding of that than we have in the past, and then have different questions, different messages that are targeted to these audiences. But the key thing that bridges them is the results are not matching the promises and having a real negative impact on people's lives. And then we asked this question. I mean, honestly, it's like a clickbait type question, which the click was baited. Newsweek reported on this. We asked the question of just like, if we could repeal the 22nd Amendment that prohibits a third term, and we had a presidential head-to-head between Barack Obama and Donald Trump. This electorate, this voters in this poll supported Trump 48 by 2 points over Kamala Harris. But in this poll, 49% support Barack Obama versus 42% from Donald Trump. And as you can see, when we look at the differences between how people reported their voting in the 24 election versus how they would vote in this matchup, you see real differences, particularly with young men. They reported voting for Trump by a 5-point margin, but here they support Obama by a 17-point margin. Men 35 to 49, they didn't support Harris, but they support Obama. And you see larger movement, particularly with the groups that I think the conventional wisdom is that Democrats under Kamala Harris underperformed with. So again, Trump is not magic. Trump is not all powerful. Trump has a base and a record. And I think the key for us is that his actions are not popular. And we can credibly say that they are not delivering on the promises that they made, knowing that different audiences are going to respond to different tones, and the tone is going to matter, and the segmentation is going to matter, and how we talk to people, both, as you saw from our previous webinar, of just how fractured our media environment is. In a lot of ways, that provides us an opportunity to say different things to different people. The cuts and firings in Washington are not popular. But like I said, it's like painting Elon Musk and Donald Trump as similar is not going to be successful. Sorry, had a cat that just woke up. And nuance, as always, is essential. It's even more essential now. And I mean, from election day through the early shock and awe days of his administration, Trump has had his smoothest run in public life, and that is clearly over. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this. Like we said, this is available, will be available to you all to look at more in depth, and I'm always available to answer questions, particularly through email, or some of you have my phone number, but would love any questions. Take it away, Camille.
All right, before we get into questions, there's a lot more to discover. So as we talked about earlier, we have hundreds of thousands of data points that we would love to share with you. We recently launched a data portal that is a finalist for a Read Award. So if you're interested in learning more about our data portal or enrolling into it and asking any questions about any issues in going on across the country, we'd be happy to onboard you, and you can use that QR code there. And then I have one final poll for you. After this webinar, let me make sure it's not in the middle of the screen. Would you like to connect with Change Research to learn about future work, gain access to in-depth analysis of our Ukraine memo, or access to our analysis of voter perceptions on news media? We recently did a webinar on media consumption habits with American voters as well, which may be of interest for you. Now, we're going to move on to questions. I will leave this poll up for you, just so we can make sure that we get any materials to you that you are interested in. And I'll leave the QR code up too if you're interested in learning more about our data portal. Julie asked Stephen, do you have any info on buyer's remorse, or and who they are and how to message to them?
I don't think we have enough of that yet. Like when you sort of look at the Trump voters, people said they voted for Trump in 2024. Most of them are very, very strongly supportive of him now. And I think if there's anything that they're going to have more remorse about, it's going to be the economic performance. It's going to be, like, as we've seen since then, the stock market decline, the tariffs, the erratic unpredictability, and then just nothing being done on costs. But actually, we're just writing a survey this morning for a future majority that will be released in a few weeks, where that is a question that we ask specifically of both Trump and third-party voters. It takes a while for people to admit that they made a mistake. And if you look back at the history of polling during George Bush's second term, it was really after the loss in the 2006 midterms where Republicans could feel like they could break in how they responded to Bush's approval questions. And it's going to take a while. For people don't like to admit that they made mistakes. Not everyone like me is able to avoid making mistakes. But it will take more of a while for that to show up. But I think like that 18% of people who are soft on Trump or undecided in the congressional, like, let's benchmark that at 18, and we'll get a good sense in like 6 months to a year how much that grows. And I think that will be the other thing that we want to look at.
All right. And to what do you attribute this very rapid drop in consumer confidence via this Trump? For 2 years, people thought Trump would improve this cost situation, but it evaporated so fast.
I was talking about this with someone recently about, and sort of this very sort of high level discussion about like people's sort of like realities that they live in, and sort of thinking about that in the context of campaigns. And it's like there's a sort of the reality of people's lives and what they experience, and then the reality of what's being discussed in a campaign. And I think we like at some point, like the campaign bubble, the campaign sort of reality zone is like disappears. And I think like too often people in politics and people in the media think that the campaign is just sort of its own thing and goes on forever, and that there's never sort of reality. And during a campaign, it's very easy to keep reality from the sort of very controlled environment, the way things are discussed. But the big part of it is just it's people are responding to what they perceive as their economic reality, and it's actually no different than when he came into office the first time, and that Obama, like, there was no big drop in consumer confidence when Obama transitioned to Trump. The people that were confident under Obama and that reality they were experiencing continued because Trump didn't really fundamentally change anything from that. And that continued for quite a while, and he took political advantage of that. The perception of consumer confidence under Joe Biden was substantially lower during his presidency than Barack Obama's. And in a lot of ways, it's like Trump is moving into the actual reality, not campaign rhetoric. And that we shouldn't actually have expected that to change much. And in fact, it hasn't. I think the only thing is just when you start out low, you can improve and take credit for that. That was the key to Ronald Reagan's success. And in a lot of ways, it's why Barack Obama got reelected and was fairly popular all throughout his second term. And that would be the one thing of just like he starts out low and people get more confident over time. But we're in a completely different economic, political, and communications environment where that's going to be much tougher to do. And it's much tougher for a president, really, and to dramatically improve people's perceptions of the economy. Their actions, though, can make people perceive it as worse. And we've certainly actually seen that play out much more since when this poll was finalized.
Alrighty. And an anonymous attendee asked, doesn't this just show how polarized folks are? It seems like the overall majority is just relying on Democrats being more represented than Republicans.
Yes, I would agree. I think that's a problem. I think we found this. It's the hardest thing in doing these polls is trying to segment out who is actually movable, which is what we've tried to do. But like in all the polls that I did for clients and in our public polling last year, we only found about like 15% who are movable, and actually went down once Harris replaced Biden on the ticket. And that's problematic. I think the key thing is now is just when we're thinking about responses and thinking about communications, we can talk in a way about the reality that doesn't get into partisanship. And it's just going to be a long, hard slog to reverse this, which is, I think, is also just like the work that people can do to register young voters, engage people that are not politically active in what the stakes are and what these actual debates are about and what the consequences are. It's really the most fruitful work that we can do, just sort of knowing that we're like only really going to the limit of just how much we can actually advance things. But when you sort of look at a longer time horizon, like no one would have thought that Barack Obama would have won the 2008 election by as much as he did after the 2005 election, where there are multiple books and endless magazine profiles talking about the permanent Republican majority. Things do change in politics, but the key is doing all the work to be in position where events happen that we can capitalize on them and have people take a fresh look at Democratic candidates and Democratic policies.
All right, and then we have a state representative from Pennsylvania, Christina Sappi, asked, how can state electeds use this information heading into 2026? Just focus on the economic failures?
Um, I think yes, and also describing what is at stake. And I think, thank you, Representative Sappi, both for running for office and the work that you do. But you are on the front lines. You are going to be the one elected official and one Democratic elected official that anyone in your district is going to talk to. Um, Much more likely to talk to you than John Fetterman, Josh Shapiro, and others. And I think the key thing that you can do is when you're doing town halls and any voter contact, is really just give people clear information about what you're doing, what the stakes are, and then give them ways that they can help you. And I think a big part of the real strength in Democratic campaigns for decades has been the field campaigns and organizing and door-to-door contact. I think now we've got to really be recruiting digital volunteers and people that can help amplify your message, the Democratic message, what you've accomplished through their social media channels, because this sort of decentralized environment really is going to benefit much more from 6 million people talking in a whole variety of different channels than any one set of talking points from Washington, D.C. and state capitals and stuff that's just, or TV ads that are going to be run during a campaign. The real thing that people really want is clear information from someone who they believe is an honest broker. And that is the real strength that state legislators can do, because they can be that honest broker to give people real information in ways that just people higher up in office just can't do, because they're relying really on media coverage and then what they're paying for.
Thank you. And Lisa Brand asked, so much of the messaging at protests revolves around the culture war issues related to domination over groups, which seems counterproductive given these findings. Are reproductive rights the one exception?
Yes. My colleague Lauren Goldstein and our comms team, I believe we have results from this poll on abortion issue, or from our previous poll on choice issues. And she's written a strong essay on just, I think there's this perception that like reproductive issues split voters when they don't. They're 2-1 people in favor of reproductive freedom, and only about I think about a fifth of voters want complete and total bans. And any issue like that, it's issues that unite supporters, divide opponents, but also people feel stake and emotion in. That's how you get people involved and engaged. And I think that was, and the other Republicans know this, because Trump really didn't engage on reproductive issues at all in the campaign. They were able to effectively muzzle JD Vance and all his weird ideas on this effectively, and really didn't try to engage. And what they focused on was really stoking their base on what they were really motivated by on an intense level, which we see in this poll is immigration. But for choice and reproductive freedom, it is a way to engage on our terms. I think the challenge is going to be is to find the specific battles where Republicans are willing to engage instead of strategically retreat on this. But I think that we need to be aware for when they're retreating, because when they retreat, the issue becomes less salient. And I think we got to figure out how to prevent that. I have a great analogy of how the Russian army are taking back Kursk that could relate to that, but that's not really, don't need to make every single reference that pops into my head.
And Eleanor was surprised that a random sample of people know or care about Eric Adams. and CFPB, or care at all. So
We
I'm
just
sorry. She wants to know how you asked the question, and was it by telling them what happened first and then asking?
we asked Eric Adams in the favorability. It was not high in terms of the people that knew him, but when we did this poll was conducted about a week after the that did get a lot of news at the time about the deal in New York. And the CFPB is the real strength of the CFPB is the actual name. It was a very well named organization, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. People are responding to that actual name, and I believe in that question, and that is why there was such a mixed response to that. I think if you ask people what the CFPB is or use those terms, people will be less hesitant, but just the name of itself is enough to drive opposition to the idea of closing it. And Eric Adams, I mean, it was about 30% could either rate him favorably or unfavorably. And that really was at the time when we asked this the most in the news.
Gary Pierce asked, should Democrats attack Musk or focus on Trump?
I mean, Trump is the ultimate decision maker, and people perceive him as holding people accountable in DC and as the main actor. I don't think it's an either or. It's just we need a Trump strategy and a Musk strategy, and they can't be the same thing.
All righty. Evan McKee asked, were there any questions or phrasing on how Panama might be taken over, or is it just a nebulous, we should recapture it?
I think it is recapturing the canal. I think if we asked sort of taking over the country of Panama and its canal would be a little bit different. But like the entire like history of talking about the Panama Canal from the 70s, when the Carter administration fulfilled the original treaty obligation, which was to let Panama control it after we built it, has always been in the Republican DNA of we built it, we should own it and control it, as opposed to the whole country. But I think if we sort of get into like how the United States would recapture the Panama Canal and the potential military conflict of that would be different. But this is true in the 70s and is true now, that Republicans do believe that the Panama Canal should be exclusively controlled by Americans.
All righty. And then the last question that we have time for, Terry asks, when will the next poll be conducted? Will the result also be presented in a webinar? And the answer to that question is we conduct internal polling every month. We tend to do a webinar every month as well. So we will be sure to keep you posted on any new information that we see. And although there were a lot of other questions that we were not able to get to today, I encourage you to, again, answer the poll, ask to connect with someone from Change Research. We'd be happy to answer your questions and talk more about how we can support your work going forward, or how we can connect you with any resources that we have, like the data portal that I mentioned earlier. Is there anything else that you would like to add, Stephen or Mike, before we go?
No, just thank you all for attending. And if you have any questions, please reach out to Kamel, me, or Mike, particularly if you're interested in doing your own research.
Yeah,
Alrighty.
amazing research by Stephen, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you all. Until next time.